The name of this sermon is He Comes to You in Your Doubt. One of the things about Easter is the sun is supposed to shine like it is right now, and it's supposed to be joyful. It's right and proper to have a Good Friday service where you recognize the pain and suffering that Jesus went through for your salvation. But now it's Easter, and we need to have joy. And you wonder why people only come on Easter. Why is it there's people that only come on Easter, and you say, what's up with that? You often talk about people who faithfully come to church for years, and then they stop, and maybe they can't put their finger on it. What is it why? Maybe it was a slight from another Christian that they took offense to, or maybe it was they can't even put their finger on it. And maybe it was gradual and slow to the point that they don't even recognize when it happened. It was just, well, I didn't go this week and next week, and then a month had gone by. The person was away on vacation, and when they came back, they didn't go back to church, or maybe they were sick, and when they were well, they didn't. But maybe they still come on Easter and Christmas, and they recognize that this is nice, but it's something they're not interested in anymore. It's understandable, because all of us, at one time or another, have a crisis in faith. We think, Pastor Gordon Horstman, he's a lovely man. I really enjoy him. He told this story about his wife. His first wife came to one day, said, I don't think I love you anymore. And without stopping, without thinking about it, he says, well, I love you enough for both of us, and that will have to do. And it did. It did do. It was enough. She just needed someone. Her answer was, I love you. And there's an assurance that there's love there even if I don't feel it. And of course, after a while, she did feel it. It's why coming to church is so important, and why Paul, or whoever wrote Hebrews, wrote it in 10, verse 23. Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering. For he who promises is faithful. And let us consider how to stimulate one another in love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more when you see the day drawing near. Jesus is saying, look, it's okay, it's great that you had a wonderful experience one day, but you can't let that just be all there is. There's a story of how you can try this yourself. You've got a little fire going, you're camping, and the fire's going, and you can see a coal in there, glowing red hot. And you take that coal and you knock it to one side, and you'll see it's not glowing red hot anymore. Pretty soon, if you leave it there, it's cold. It has to be with others. The fire has to be around it to keep it going. Well, his disciples had lived with Jesus for 3 years. They had come to know that he was the Messiah, the one that was expected, and that he was totally human. He lived in a climate where it was very hot, so he sweat like everyone else, and he smelled like everyone else. And he went to the bathroom the same way everyone else does. And he probably snored when his head was crooked like everyone else. He was fully human. They knew he was the Messiah. But what did this mean now that he'd been crucified? How did all that fit? There's the puzzle pieces that are from another puzzle. And then on top of that, he's risen, if you could believe what the women had said. And if it's all true, why did it need to happen? What was the purpose? And what was changing now? What did that change? Well, this account, The Road to Emmaus, I was reading the commentaries about this account, and it's a good-natured story. A story of these couple Christian men who were unaware of what was happening to them. It's like a birthday party. It's going to be a surprise. And all this planning is going on behind the scenes, and they aren't aware of it. And then all of a sudden, surprise! And these people would be standing there and saying, I have no idea what's going on, but we can watch it and say, this is beautiful, it's wonderful. And we can watch Jesus masterfully change them from a fog into the light of day. Let's look at the text. Number one, I wish we could do more than talk. See, they spent 3 days talking, and nothing had come of it. In verse 13 it says, and behold, 2 of them were going that very day to the village called Emmaus, which is about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all the things that had taken place. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself approached and began traveling with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. And he said to them, what are these words you are exchanging with one another as you walk? And they stood still looking sad. And you can't help but feel empathy for them, that they felt sad, but you're still happy because you know what's coming. And these are a couple guys that thought they had it all figured out. They were fully on board with Jesus, and they thought that he was going to save them in Israel from Roman tyranny. They had a picture in the head what this looked like, and now everything had fallen apart for them. Worse, they had no one to blame but the people who were their leaders, who should have been on board in Jesus' most strongest supporters. A modern example would be watching an elected official do something, and all you can say is shake your head. I had something like that happen to me this week. I bought folding walls, and some churches have them so they can divide one area from another. And so I bought folding walls for Elections Canada. And the walls arrived, and we stocked the track because that's the way it is. And the inventory said you have lots of track and lots of brackets, and lo and behold, the inventory was wrong. And so there's 800 pounds of track that I have to order. And if it had come with the 5,200 pounds, it would have cost next to nothing. They would have loaded it on the top, and off it would have come. Perfect. And so I have to order it. And it's 800 pounds, it's 16 feet long, and most people won't take 16 feet. And so I called Midland, I called FedEx, I called all these people, and Armour said, call DFL or DSHL, I can't remember what it was. Third biggest carrier in the U.S., they'll help you fix this up. So I called the 1-800 number, and I was thinking $300, no, probably $500 because of extra cost and gas and stuff. $2,600. The 5,200 pounds only cost me $2,450. And so a little bundle of track this big, and I said, the guy that made arrangements, that has been in this 37 years, said, I called him and said, look, I need a rate on this because, and it's only small, and he said, I can't give you a good rate because I ship big shipments. And I said, why is this happening? And he said, well, Trudeau had a mandate that if you weren't vaccinated, when you came into the country, you had to self-isolate. And so that takes out 10% of the Canadian truckers and 43% of the U.S. truckers. And that's a big chunk. And the other truckers have watched the video of the RCMP arresting drivers and taking their bank accounts, and they just said, we're really busy, we don't have to come to Canada. And the ones that are coming said, I will charge you 3 times as much as I usually do, and if you don't like it, that's okay, I got lots of business. That's what the woman, basically, when I said that's expensive, she didn't make any excuses, it's what it is. It is what it is. And he said, it's not going to get any better for a while. And I said, I want to blame someone, and I had a pretty good idea who that person was that I should blame. But and the problem is, most people don't need the track for an operating wall. But they need peanut butter and cornflakes and oranges. All of those are going to be more expensive too. Well, Jesus' disciples were feeling that kind of frustration, but worse, because their hopes and dreams had been shattered. 1,000 years of waiting for this Messiah to come, and he had come, and they had been fully on board, and their leaders and rulers had killed him. And as you watch this play out, you have to smile, because Jesus walks up and joins them, and it just fills me with a happy feeling of them not knowing, but I get to watch. Reminds me of many stories that bring a smile to your face. There's one of these stories where there's a baseball team, and the way it works is the umpire says you have to have so many players or you have to forfeit the game. And this team, the little softball baseball team, has got not enough players. And he says, look, I can wait for 10 more minutes and you're going to have to forfeit. And it's the most important game of the year. And just so happens that one of the players who was on their team moved away, and he was back visiting, and he walked up just at the right time. And they scream his name, and he comes up, and the umpire says, yep, he'll do, play ball. And everybody's cheering. You can hear it a mile away. And there's another story of a little child, and their parents know that they have to have what's it called here? I lost my place here. It's called what's it called? They take it from the back, right back here. Bone marrow transplant. And there's nobody to do it. And they're crying in the waiting room because they know that it's a death sentence for their son or daughter. And somebody taps them on the back and says, I don't want to interrupt, but I just was in to give bone marrow, and I went through all that suffering and pain, and now they can't use it. And if you go to the doctor, maybe you can have it. And all of a sudden, it's not cheering, it's crying, but it's not crying in pain, it's tears of joy. See, men like to be a hero. And so let me tell you this story I made up entirely in my head as I washed my car in the driveway. And the reason I made it up is because I've used my car for people who can't afford it to drive them to their wedding. So here I am, I'm washing my car, and I'm thinking about nothing in particular, and I come up with this story. So I'm in the driveway, the car, I'm wiping off the water, and a car, 12, 15-year-old car, coasts to a stop in front of the driveway. And it's all decorated for a wedding, and they blew the brake line. Because that's what happens when a car gets old, it rusts, and now they can't go anywhere. And there's a woman standing outside the car in a wedding dress, and she knows that budget's tight, she can't afford to have the car towed or repaired or a replacement. And so I walk over and say, look, you can put those streamers on my old car, I'll drive you to the wedding, and I will bring your car into the garage and I'll replace the brake line. It's not a big job, it's not hard. And consider it my wedding gift to you. Now, it's never happened, but I've thought that. And the bride would experience something akin to what these two men on the road to Emmaus were going to feel as Jesus stepped into their lives and explained how they got it all wrong and their world was not ending. In fact, it was getting much better. There could be no words extravagant enough to express their joy in a couple hours. And we can watch it happen, smiling to ourselves because we know just who joined them on the highway. That was Jesus. Jesus came up and he's walking with you. Number 2, explain it like you would to a child. Verse 18 says, one of them named Cleopas answered and said to him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem and unaware of the things that have happened here in these days? And he said to them, what things? And they said to him, the things about Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word in the sight of God and all the people. And now the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all of this, it is the 3rd day since these things happened, and also some women among us amazed us. When they were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those also who were with us went to the tomb, found it just exactly as the women also had said, but him they did not see. As you watch this out, you have to smile at their frustration. They talked this nearly to death and looked at it every possible way, and no matter how they looked at it, there was no solution to the problem. And now this stranger had said, tell me about it. I've never heard about it. Explain it to me. And they say, how could you not know? That's what we've been talking about for 3 days, and everybody else in Jerusalem have been talking about it. And they wouldn't mind explaining it one more time, because sometimes when you explain, you go over and over something. You've heard that expression, the 3rd time's the charm, and you say, oh, now I get it, now I understand. But usually that's not the way it works. Sometimes it does. I had something like that happen to me this past week, Monday. I was applying for my pension, and so I was online, and I'm filling in all this stuff, and there's 7 questions you have to answer. What was your mother's maiden name? Put that in so that... Anyway, then when you're all done that, they say, pick a username, and that's not Peter Atkinson, that's something like guy with old cars, or old man walking, or something like that you will remember no one else was. And then pick a password. And so I picked a name, old man with cars, or something like that. And I looked at the instructions. It said 8 letters or more, capitals and small, no numbers, and I did it exactly what they said. And it wouldn't take it. And I did it again. I changed it up. I changed the name. Did it again. Still wouldn't take it. I read the instructions 3 more times. And you know how sometimes you can't make it work. And I took the computer down to Wanda and I said, Wanda, am I just stupid and not reading these instructions properly? And I've done this exactly the way they said. And she looked at it just like that. She had it figured out. What was happening was I was doing everything right, but of the 3 or 5 or 8 million people had picked that same name. And there was only one name, one person in all of Canada that could pick that name. And she said, You got to, that somebody already has that. Now I thought to myself, I went upstairs, put a new name in, and it took it. Just picked another name. I wish Jesus had done that, because he would have made it more clear, because that's what he does. But it should have said, you picked a great name and it's all right that somebody else has it, pick another. If they'd done that, it would have just flown. But I understood it's the Canadian government and they have to make stuff frustrating, or they don't get paid, I think. Well, Jesus is a good listener, and he does this here too. And they tell him the story, even though they don't know it's him, they tell it to him. You have to smile, because they've probably been talking the same thing, and they both together, and they couldn't get the words out fast enough, and all of this, and Jesus just listens, and you know it's him. Reminds me of a story of there was a speaker at a conference, and it was a Dr. Harrison, and it was a woman, and she had a name that could be a male name or a female name, like Allison. I know a man whose name is Allison. Anyway, so she had this amazing scientific discovery, and she was going to speak. And so everyone's milling around waiting for the speaker to come. It's going to be in 15 minutes, and she walks in. And some nice man, a self-appointed expert, mansplains to her what the topic is going to be. And he explains, because she's a woman, she won't understand. And when he's all done, she says, well, I'm Dr. Harrison. I'm the speaker, because I'm the foremost expert in the field. And you wonder to yourself, if the guy said, I wish there was a rock here I could crawl under, because that's what happened. The nice thing is, these men are with Jesus, and he's not going to say things like, get thee behind me, Satan, like he said to Peter, or something like that. This whole thing is wrapped in a bundle of love and mercy, and whatever he says will have no sting in the words. Number 3, a lesson in stuff you missed. Verse 25 says, and he said to them, O foolish men, and slow of heart to believe in all the prophets had spoken. Was it not necessary for the Christ to suffer these things and to enter into his glory? Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to the things concerning himself in the scriptures. Now, over the years, I've taken engines apart and changed the head gaskets. And you take the engine apart, and you get them to check the heads, and you bring it back, and you buy the special bolts, and you put it all together. And you've got the manual in front of you, and you're asking yourself a question. Well, what about this? And it's not in the manual. And the reason it's not in the manual is because everyone knows that, but you don't. And you wish you had the person who wrote the manual standing there leaning on the fender and saying, well, what's going on here? And the person would say, well, you did it mostly right, but you left this part out. I built a V6 Buick that I had. The guy had bought the car, had somebody switched the engine out, he'd driven it 500 miles, and the engine head gasket had gone. And he just said, $500, you can have the car. So I was going to replace the head gasket. So it was all back together, and I put the parts back on, and then I took the cable that all the plugs were in, and it was too short. How can it be too short? I unplugged them 3 days ago. Well, what they didn't tell me is you have to run that around the engine before you put the other parts on, because now it's so I had to take all those parts back off. You would wish that somebody would tell you that ahead of time. Well, Jesus says, you foolish men and slow of heart. And it's a fair observation. But it's not unkind. It happened to me, right as I told you about my pension the other day, right there, clear as a bell. And Jesus is saying, look, it's right here. The prophets and Moses, it's all as clear as a bell. And, you know, Jesus, in this idea, in this story, is like when you put up a Christmas tree, and the old Christmas tree lights, you remember you had to screw in the bulb, and you had to check each bulb, and you put it on and 5 don't light. And what Jesus is doing with his explanation is he's going and tightening all the bulbs. And as each one comes on, you say, oh, I see now. That's nice, that's wonderful, it's pretty. That makes it more clear. And every time the light comes on, a weight is lifted off your shoulders, and you think, this might work after all. I guess God was smart enough to make it, in spite of the fact that I had it all figured out, he was much better at it. It's like someone explaining the mysteries of the world, and you could never understand. It's just getting better and brighter with every passage explained. This is what Jesus did when he walked with them together, without stress or incrimination, friends on a walk. And their hearts were lifted and joy was coming with the understanding that maybe God had done it right and they just didn't understand his goodness and mercy. You know, lots of times we get thinking that we've got it all figured out. We've got our life ahead is planned, and God does something and changes everything up, and then years later we recognize that he got it right. Easter morning should be about joy, and this story is beautiful. And it's joy, and it comes on so gradually that those men the joy would be coming up through their past their waist, and now it was at their heart, and they hadn't even noticed it coming. I didn't read the last part, the part from 28 on where they're approaching the village and said, look, we'd like you to stay, and we talked some more, and then their eyes were opened, and they recognized in 31 that Jesus, and he vanished from their sight. He's alive, and he chose to spend the first day with them. And you know what happened when he vanished? If you continue on, they were out the door and going back to Jerusalem, those 7 miles. And I picture that walk to Emmaus, and they're dragging their feet, and they're not going fast, and there's nothing, they're so depressed. But there's no dragging of their feet on the way back to Jerusalem. They're moving at such a clip that any talk would have to come between puffs of voice and pants of breath. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming is one of those wonderful expressions. Those phrases that, because we call it Good Friday, but in reality we understand and know that it wasn't good at all. It's a horrible miscarriage of justice, with Jesus being abandoned by his friends, and there's enough pain to kill any person. And even before he gets to the cross, there's so much pain. And then there's the disgrace of hanging on the cross. And there's only one saving grace, the fact that normally when people were hung on a cross, the final insult was they wouldn't bury them. They threw them in a pit and they would never be buried. But someone, a hidden disciple, saved his body from being thrown into that grave. The Sunday coming is where there's only joy. Joy when the tomb is open. Joy when the angels tell the women that Jesus is risen. There's joy when Mary talks to the gardener and discovers that it's really Jesus. And all that joy included in this. They left, these two men left sad and came back rejoicing, ready to tell their story to anyone who would listen. We always have a story from Jesus, but Easter Sunday is special because it's a story that has so much proof that it's real. People say, I don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead. That's crazy. People don't do that. But even skeptics will say to you, even though I don't believe it, I believe that the people who wrote the Gospels did believe it. And they believed it knowing that they would suffer and die for that belief. The guy that wrote The Case for Christ, Chuck Colson. But Chuck Colson said this. He said that I know that Easter is true because I was part of the Watergate, and in spite of these most powerful people couldn't keep that a secret for 10 days, and it all came out. But these men who would end up all dying, if that was a lie, they kept it a secret. Impossible. It's impossible. It would have come out in a short time. It has to be true. We can say with confidence that our God lives. We just sang that song. I serve a risen Savior. He's in the world today. I know that He is living no matter what men may say. We have that confidence, and He is alive and He lives in our hearts.